Bryce Brogle was born on September 24, 1999, in a small town in Crow Wing County, Minnesota. He was born in a small town surrounded by pristine forests and clear lakes, where nature dictated its own rhythm of life. His childhood years were spent here, amidst the expanse of pine needles and the reflections of clouds in the water. His parents, Tom and Linda, strove to create an environment of care, trust, and warmth for their son. They paid special attention to his upbringing, laying in Bryce respect for people, honesty, and the desire to work. From an early age, the boy showed friendliness and open nature, easily finding a common language with others. Classmates were drawn to him for his sincerity and kindness, and neighbors and teachers have repeatedly noted his willingness to help without unnecessary questions. He was the one who united people around him, radiating positivity and confidence that a good attitude to the world is sure to return. From an early age, Bryce Brogle showed an incredible curiosity for everything he could take apart and explore. He could spend hours with toys, appliances, and all manner of machinery, trying to figure out how they worked. His father, Tom, quickly noticed this passion, and not only did not interfere with his son, but encouraged him in every way possible. In their garage, turned into a makeshift workshop, Bryce spent most of his free time taking apart and reassembling old machinery, giving it a new life. Bryce was not only talented, but also determined. At school, he tried to develop in many directions. He played on the soccer team, participated in technical clubs, and was always reaching for new knowledge. Teachers often noted his perseverance and ability to cope with difficult tasks. He never gave up before difficulties and always looked for a way to achieve his goals. His classmates remembered him as a person who could be relied on. He knew how to support and listen to his friends and always found a way to lift the spirits of those around him. Bryce did not strive for popularity, but his sincerity and friendliness made him one of the most respected guys in school. He was able to create an atmosphere of ease and comfort around him, and his sense of humor always helped to diffuse any situation. After graduation in 2017, he made an important decision for himself, not to go to university, but to go his own way. He was always closer to the practical application of knowledge, and he knew that his vocation was to work with machinery. So he enrolled in auto mechanic courses and at the same time got a job at a local car service. It didn't take him long to prove himself. His hard work, responsibility, and perseverance quickly made him one of the best employees. Working in a car repair shop was not just a way for Bryce to earn a living, but the first step towards his cherished goal. He dreamed of creating his own workshop, where he would not just fix cars but offer unique solutions to improve them. He even had sketches of the design of the future car repair shop, and he enthusiastically shared his ideas with his friends. They recalled him saying with burning eyes, "I want it to be a place where people come with the confidence that their car is in good hands." His ambition inspired those around him, and many believed he was bound to succeed. He was willing to sacrifice his free time to work and study, because he knew that it was perseverance and dedication that would lead him to fulfill his dreams. In 2020, a life-changing encounter occurred in Bryce's life. Their interactions were easy and natural from the start. Their shared hobbies, love of the outdoors, and technology quickly brought them closer together. Bryce called her his muse, and she admired his reliability and sincerity, believing that she felt safe around him. Over time, their relationship became stronger, and Bryce got acquainted with her family. The girl's father, Michael Lee Laflex, a former military man, from the first meetings treated the guy with respect. He valued such qualities as discipline and honesty, and at first seeing them in Bryce, did not object to their connection. However, his attitude gradually began to change. By 2022, the first signs of latent animosity began to appear between Bryce and Michael. At first, it was almost imperceptible. Cordelia's father increasingly asked questions about the future of the guy, interested in his plans, but in his voice more and more often sounded doubt. Laflex was less and less sure that Bryce would be able to give his daughter the stability he thought any woman deserved. Michael, being a man of strict principles, began to see qualities in Bryce that he didn't like. It seemed to him that the young man was too enthusiastic about his work in the car service and technical projects, but not enough attention to the family future. He didn't like that his daughter was spending more and more time with a guy he didn't think was ready for serious responsibility. Although Bryce himself felt the tension, he tried not to bring things to open conflict. He realized how important his father was to his girlfriend and didn't want to make things worse. However, this did not stop Michael from frequent conversations with his daughter, in which he made it clear that he was not sure about the correctness of her choice. The girl found herself in a difficult position, torn between love for Bryce and respect for her father, who has always been her support. By August 2022, the latent tension had turned into an open confrontation. Michael was no longer hiding his resentment. He was convinced that Bryce was not the right man to provide for his daughter's future. Moreover, he began to suspect that the young man was hiding something. These thoughts, without any real basis, gradually turned into a real obsession. October 2022 in Crow Wing County began with a chilly morning. The trees were shedding their leaves, covering the ground in shades of gold and purple. The town lived its usual life, and nothing heralded any unusual events. It was an ordinary day for Bryce Brogle, too. He was going about his daily business, working in his workshop and planning to spend the evening with his girlfriend. However, no one knew that this day would be a turning point, after which nothing would ever be the same again. From the very morning, Bryce was immersed in his favorite job. He was working with cars in the car repair shop, where he and his friends were fixing an old pickup truck. There was the usual atmosphere in the shop, talking, laughing, exchanging jokes. Bryce was in a good mood, making plans for the weekend and not worrying about anything. After finishing his work, he returned home, changed his clothes, and had a quick snack. In the evening, he had a meeting with the girl and her father, Michael Laflex, to attend. Bryce didn't see it as anything out of the ordinary. To him, it was just another meeting. He hadn't told his friends that he expected anything tense, and no one had noticed anything alarming in his behavior. In the afternoon, Bryce received a call from Michael. The man suggested that he come to the warehouse where the family stored various items. The reason for the meeting didn't seem strange. Bryce had been there before and had helped with various things. Michael explained that he needed help carrying some items, and Bryce agreed without question. Before he left, he hadn't told Cordelia that he felt something strange. He took it as a normal request and just packed for the trip. However, many would later wonder if there was something in Michael's voice that should have been alarming. Didn't Bryce feel for a moment that there was more to this invitation than meets the eye? Those who saw Bryce before he left recalled that he was in his usual mood, focused, confident, calm. He said goodbye to his friends, got in his car, and drove away. That was the last time he was seen like that. When he arrived at the warehouse, he stopped making contact. At first, it wasn't a concern, but as the hours went by and there were no calls or texts from him, it started to seem strange. His girlfriend tried calling him, but the phone was silent. She decided to call her father, but Michael didn't answer either. When it got dark and Bryce still hadn't returned home, his loved ones began to worry. He always gave a warning if he was running late and never disappeared without an explanation. The girl tried to find out from her friends if anyone had seen him after lunch, but no one could say where he was. Meanwhile, Michael had returned home. According to neighbors, he looked different than usual. He was silent, avoided communication. His behavior seemed strange. This raised questions, but no one could guess what was behind it. When it became clear that Bryce was missing, his Cordelia contacted the police. She reported that he had last gone to meet her father and hadn't been in contact since. This call started a search that would lead to some unexpected discoveries. After Bryce Brogle was reported missing, the Crow Wing County Police immediately began investigating. Cordelia told investigators that he had gone to meet her father, Michael Laflex, at a warehouse and had not been heard from since. However, she soon told another important nuance. When she tried to find out from her father what happened, he said that Bryce was taken by some people who introduced themselves as undercover agents, but she did not believe him. This information immediately alerted the police. The version about unknown people posing as agents looked suspicious, especially considering that there was no information about such actions of special services in the county. Realizing that they needed to act quickly, the police headed for the warehouse, the last known location where Bryce was. At first glance, the warehouse didn't seem suspicious. It was an old building on the outskirts, away from the main roads and residential areas. There were no visible signs of struggle inside and nothing that could directly point to Bryce's disappearance. However, the very fact that he disappeared after a visit here led the police not to rule out a version of the crime. A few days later, the investigation took an unexpected turn. The police were approached by a man who claimed that Michael Laflex had confessed to him about Bryce's murder. According to the man, he was the landlord of the warehouse, and Laflex told him that he shot Bryce right in the warehouse, after which he tried to cover his tracks using bleach. He also mentioned that he used a sled to transport the body and then buried it in one of the wooded areas. This information completely contradicted Laflex's own words that Bryce was allegedly taken by unknown agents. The police now had good reason to suspect him of lying and to focus more deeply on his involvement in Bryce's disappearance. Following their findings, investigators returned to the warehouse to re-examine it. In the far corner of the warehouse, there were stains on the floor that preliminary evidence suggested might be dried blood. The floor around the suspicious stains had clearly been recently treated. The results of the blood tests confirmed that the stains found on the floor were indeed Bryce Brogle's. This was the first direct evidence that he had been in the area and had probably been attacked. Forensics also analyzed a bottle of bleach found at the scene. The fingerprints on it matched those of Michael Lee Laflex, further confirming his presence in the warehouse during or after Bryce's disappearance. In addition, police scrutinized the shoe impressions found at the scene. After careful analysis, they were matched to the shoes found in Laflex's home. The match was exact, which finally solidified the investigators' suspicions. The evidence gathered indicated that Michael Lee Laflex's version of unknown undercover agents was a fabrication. The police were increasingly inclined to believe that he was the one involved in Bryce's disappearance. The only question was, how far had he gone in his actions, and could the missing man still be found? The investigators started working on finding the body based on the information provided by the informant. At the same time, they were preparing grounds to formally charge Laflex, who was now under close surveillance. After receiving information about the sled and possible burial site, Crow Wing County Police launched an extensive search operation. Law enforcement began surveying wooded areas, focusing on remote areas where the suspect may have traveled. The search involved canine teams with dogs trained to find bodies by scent, as well as drones equipped with thermal imaging cameras to detect disturbed soil structure. The operation covered a wide area, but at one point investigators noticed a patch of land that clearly showed signs of recent disturbance. The soil in this area looked disturbed, and there were crumpled branches in the vicinity, as if someone had tried to hide the signs of their activity. On closer inspection of the site, a shallow makeshift grave was found, covered by a layer of twigs, dry leaves, and earth. All indications were that the site had been prepared in haste, with the intention of disguising the footprints as best as possible. On exhumation, it was confirmed that the body found was that of Bryce Brogle. Initial examinations by forensic experts immediately revealed a characteristic head wound. Later, an autopsy officially confirmed that the cause of death was a gunshot wound to the back of the head, which was completely consistent with the informant's confession. Each discovered evidence only tightened the ring around Michael Lee Laflex, finally confirming his involvement in the crime. Now the police faced the next task, to bring the case to trial and get justice for Bryce. After the discovery of Bryce Brogle's body, all the evidence gathered pointed to Michael Lee Laflex as the prime suspect. His presence in the warehouse, use of bleach, shoe tracks, and confession to a third party built an indisputable case against him. However, an additional blow to his position was the statement of the warehouse landlord. He told police that he had heard Laflex say a few days earlier that he wanted to kill Bryce. This information finally strengthened the suspicions of the investigators. It was decided to arrest Laflex and interrogate him before the events were completely erased from his memory. A warrant for the arrest of Michael Lee Laflex was issued promptly. The police realized that the suspect possessed a firearm, and therefore the arrest operation had to be thought out to the smallest detail. A team of operatives arrived at his home prepared for possible resistance. Laflex, however, met them calmly. When his rights were read to him, he only said glumly, "I knew you'd come." This phrase immediately caught the investigators' attention. It not only indicated his realization of his guilt, but also hinted at his belief that detention was inevitable. It was a tragic mistake, he pronounced when investigators began to press for an explanation. He claimed that the situation was out of control, and that he had not planned the murder. According to him, everything happened as a result of an emotional outburst, not a pre-planned crime. However, his claims sounded unconvincing. Investigators broke down Michael Lee Laflex's line of defense step by step. They consistently presented him with the following evidence. Traces of blood in the warehouse. DNA testing confirmed that the blood belonged to Bryce. Laflex could not explain their presence if, as he claimed, he did not intend to cause harm. Use of bleach. Michael denied that he was trying to cover his tracks, but the fact that bleach and a chemical odor were found at the crime scene indicated a deliberate attempt to cover his track. Transportation of the body. The sled tracks led from the warehouse towards the woods. This confirmed that Laflex had prepared in advance to move the body. Confession to a witness. The testimony of the person to whom Laflex told the details of the murder was key. When asked why he shared this information, Michael replied, "I just couldn't keep it to myself." Laflex continued to insist that the murder was not premeditated. He claimed that the weapon was in his possession by accident and the shot was fired in a fit of rage. "I was furious. He was ruining my daughter's life. he stated. But investigators noted that his later actions, using bleach, transporting the body, trying to hide evidence, indicated forethought. When asked why he brought the bleach with him, Laflex hesitated, but then said, "I took it just to clean up. I didn't think I would need it." That detail raised new suspicions. Experts pointed out that a person who accidentally commits a murder is unlikely to bring the means to remove evidence in advance. On the third interrogation, Laflex could not withstand the pressure. His calm was replaced by anger when the investigators mentioned his daughter again. "You don't understand. He ruined her life," he shouted, yet he was never able to provide any evidence of Bryce's guilt. After hours of questioning, Laflex admitted for the first time that he had come to the warehouse with a gun. "I wanted to scare him," he said. That confession was a key moment. Investigators could now prove that the murder was not random, but rather that Laflex had prepared for it in advance. A few days later, under the pressure of evidence and questions, Michael Lee Laflex gave a full confession. He revealed that he suspected Bryce of abusing his daughter and decided to deal with him personally. He said he wanted to have a serious conversation in the warehouse, but the situation quickly got out of hand. At one point, he grabbed a gun and shot Bryce in the back of the head. He then described how he tried to cover his tracks. He used bleach to clean up the crime scene and a sled to transport the body to a wooded area where he buried it, covering it with branches. "I didn't know what to do. It was panic," he said, but his prepared actions said otherwise. During interrogations, Laflex underwent a psychological evaluation. Experts noted his high level of aggression and inability to control his emotions in stressful situations. However, their conclusion was unequivocal. He was sane and realized the consequences of his actions. The collected evidence and confession were sufficient grounds to take the case to court. The Crow Wing County Prosecutor's Office charged Laflex with aggravated first-degree premeditated murder. Investigators were no longer faced with the question of who's to blame. Their goal was now to get justice for Bryce Brogle. The trial of Michael Lee Laflex began in April 2024 in the District Court of Crow Wing County, Minnesota. The case generated widespread publicity not only locally but also in the national media. The public discussed not only the brutal murder of Bryce Brogle, but also deeper questions, where the line of self-defense lies and how dangerous is lynching based on personal suspicion. The prosecutor's office charged Laflex with first-degree premeditated murder, alleging that his actions were planned and meticulously prepared. The prosecution presented investigative files, witness testimony, and expert testimony as evidence. Prosecutors' main argument was that it was an act of revenge, not an emotional breakdown. Laflex's attorneys, on the other hand, tried to prove that he acted under the influence of temporary insanity. They insisted that the defendant was undergoing severe emotional stress related to his suspicions about Bryce and was not in control of his actions at the time of the crime. The prosecution presented a consistent picture of events proving that the murder was cold-blooded and premeditated. Key evidence presented included witness testimony. An acquaintance of Laflex testified that Michael confessed to him to the murder, describing the details, the shot to the back of the head, the use of bleach to clean the crime scene, and the transportation of the body using a sled. Physical evidence. Bloodstains belonging to Bryce Brogle and a bottle of bleach were found in the warehouse where the crime occurred. Experts confirmed that the floor surface had been partially treated with chemicals, indicating an attempt to cover up the evidence. Murder weapon. Police recovered a gun at the Laflex home, and ballistics testing confirmed that it was the gun that fired the fatal bullet found in Bryce's head. Attempts to stage disappearance. After the murder, Laflex tried to create the impression that Bryce had been kidnapped by unknown people posing as agents. However, the police found no corroboration of this version. The prosecution also emphasized that Laflex did not just commit the murder, but did everything possible to cover his tracks, which confirmed his conscious approach to the crime. Laflex's defense insisted that the murder was committed in a state of passion. They argued that the defendant acted impulsively without realizing the consequences. Mental state. A defense psychiatrist testified that Laflex suffered from high anxiety and post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, which could have affected his ability to make rational judgments. Lack of criminal history. The defense emphasized that Michael had never previously committed a crime, was a respectful man, and a caring father. However, the prosecution presented evidence that contradicted the defense's version. Laflex's actions after the murder indicated a cold-blooded calculation, not an emotional outburst. During the trial, both prosecution and defense witnesses were heard. Bryce's friends and co-workers said he always tried to get along with his girlfriend's family, avoided conflict, and was a friendly person. Laflex's relatives, on the other hand, claimed that Michael had become irritable, suspicious in recent months, and often said that he did not trust Bryce. Forensic experts confirmed that Laflex had acted methodically, using bleach, transporting the body on a sled, and trying to cover his tracks could not have been spontaneous decisions. The defense tried to undermine the credibility of the prosecution witnesses, but never presented convincing arguments in favor of the version of temporary insanity. After 2 weeks of trial, the jury went to deliberate. For 3 days, they analyzed the evidence presented by both sides. They reached a verdict. Michael Lee Laflex was found guilty of first-degree premeditated murder. The jury concluded that the evidence and testimony presented left no doubt that Laflex intentionally and knowingly killed Bryce Brogle. In April 2024, the judge announced the sentence. Michael Lee Laflex was sentenced to life in prison without parole. In addition to the life sentence, Michael Laflex was ordered to pay restitution and court costs totaling $14,596. This case caused a lot of reaction in the community. Many have discussed it as an example of what unwarranted lynching can lead to. It also raised questions about how important it is for law enforcement to intervene when violence is suspected, in order to avoid tragedies based on personal speculation and emotion. Bryce's family expressed gratitude to the police and prosecutors for bringing the case to a conclusion.